Well, welcome everybody to a live broadcast of Unbolted. It's Thursday, April 10th, and I am super excited to bring on the precinct strategy guru, Dan Schultz. But before I do, I wanted to start this broadcast with a very important video that he did with Steve Bannon to give you a little bit of a clue of what Dan's work has been. So let me share my screen and let's give you a chance to hear the video that Dan was on with Steve Bannon. Let's see if this will work here. All right.
If you want to get real about political change, what Dan Schultz is about to tell you is the way to do it. So Dan, the floor is yours. Take it and tell people how you're about to offer a course on personal political empowerment. How did they do it, Dan?
Thanks, Steve. It's real simple, and most people learn this, at least I did back in the late 60s in 7th grade in social studies in civics class. Essentially, what we have to do is we conservatives have to take over one of the two major political parties. Our party is the one we've been using is the Republican Party. The problem is we're not in control of it. And the reason we're not in control of it is we're not in it. You asked me before I came on, what group are you promoting? And the group I'm promoting is the Republican Party. But you're not in the party unless you're one of these. See, I've got my PC button.
All right. So that was a great kind of intro video. Let's bring on to the stage here Dan Schultz. Dan, welcome. Thank you for being with us here at Unbolted, and we're broadcasting live across Facebook and X and Rumble. So again, thanks for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. I've heard so much about you for quite a few years now, since I ran for office in 2022 and got involved with some people locally that talked to you, worked with you, and were actually implementing your strategy here in Spokane. So it's such an honor to have you on. So tell us about your story. And just to preface real quick, if you want to figure out how to get involved and have effective action, I think everybody since 2020, especially 2020, it's when I really got more involved. You know, people are trying to figure out what they can do to change the course of direction in our nation, in our state, and locally. So you want to listen and take notes about what Dan's going to tell you. But Dan, let's set the stage a little bit. I'm curious about how did you get into this? What's the background of leading you into this work?
Well, like we were discussing before I came on the program, I was lucky enough way back in 1968 and 1969 to have a course in basic American civics, which was part of social studies then in 7th grade. And so I had 2 semesters, and my recollection is it was the first semester where we had Mr. Sam Elward, who was my teacher, and he taught us about the Wisconsin Constitution, also the U.S. Constitution, which we knew a little bit about by 7th grade, and then the Wisconsin Constitution, and then also how the political parties operated in Wisconsin, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And the Wisconsin legislature back then published every 2 years what was called the Wisconsin Blue Book. And the Blue Book had, and he showed us that, and it had chapters in it on the political parties and the statutes that governed the conduct of the political parties that had permanent ballot status. So we learned about that. And I knew about the Blue Book because my dad was a city councilman and a county board member, and he had a copy of the Blue Book at home. So I had already read that. And so he gave us the whole course, and at the end of the course, my recollection is what he told us was, look, he goes, I've now equipped you for political action. If in the future, see, back then the voting age was 21, it wasn't 18. And he said, when you turn 21, if the country is in a political crisis, really bad. The reason it's in a political crisis is because collectively the American people have been re-electing bad people who don't take their oath of office seriously. They're not following the Constitution. So there's a way to fix that. It's through the primary elections. So pick a party and get involved in it. And then when it comes time for the incumbent to come back who's not doing a good job anymore, you can defeat that person and replace them with a new person, and that person will go to the general election ballot. Well, so I learned that and never forgot it. And then lo and behold, I moved from, so I went into the military. I went to West Point. I was an intelligence officer on active duty for almost 5.5 years. I stayed in the reserves. I went to law school, and I ended up getting my first gig with a law firm out in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles at that time, California, that was in 1989. California had a string of Republican governors. It was pretty conservative still, believe it or not. And so I thought, well, I don't really need to be involved in the party. I'll just help out on campaigns, which I did. I helped with a campaign of a woman named Susan Brooks, who won her election, but wasn't seated. And we proved that it was through election fraud. But the rules of the House are that the members of the House determine whether or not somebody can be seated as an elected delegate. And they chose the Democrat, a woman named Jane Harmon, over Susan Brooks. And there's nothing that could be done about it under the Constitution. And so then eventually I was lucky enough to move over to Arizona. So it was around 2007, the illegals were just out of control here. It was just awful. And I decided I got to do something about it. So I went to a border militia group was forming. I thought maybe I should go down to the border and take my binoculars down there and spot the illegals and direct them to the border patrol. So I went to that meeting, and there were a lot of conservatives there, and some guy in a dark suit stood up, big tall guy, nice looking young man, and he said, "Hey, going down the border, yeah, that's terrific. That's something you can do." At that time, Janet Napolitano was our governor, and she wouldn't send the National Guard down to the border. He said, "There's something else you can do, and it's called becoming a precinct committeeman." Well, ding, 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 ding. That went off in my mind. So when he got done talking, I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, I just moved here recently. Where do I need to go to get involved?" Because I knew exactly what he was talking about. And see, I thought that up until that time, Arizona was Goldwater country, and it was the party didn't need me, Well, I got to my first meeting, and there was 20 people there, my legislative district committee meeting. And so they wanted the new people to, identify themselves and say a few words about themselves. So I did. And I said, "Listen," and this was when John McCain was running in the primaries, and I was a Fred Thompson guy. And so I raised my hand. I said, "I'm Dan Schultz, and I'm very conservative. So if you're very conservative, I want to get to know you. If you look up, Attila the Hun in the dictionary, my picture is next to Attila the Hun. That's how conservative I am. And I hate John McCain. I'm a Fred Thompson guy, but I'm a conservative in the primary, Republican in the general kind of guy. So if John McCain, heaven forbid, gets the nomination, I will support him. I want you to all know that. But here's what I really want to know. There's only 20 people here. Where is everybody?" And the guy running it at the time, I learned later, was a rhino. And almost everybody on the panel, the officers, were rhinos. And so there was 5 officers and about 15 people. And 3 of us were new. I said, "Where is everybody? There's only 20 people here." I counted. He goes, "Well, that's usually what we get every month." I go, "Well, how many members do you have?" "Well, we have 40 members. I go, "Okay, so you got half of the 40 that are here tonight. How many slots do you have?" See, I knew enough to ask these questions. He said, "We have 160 slots." And I went, whoa. So the Goldwater country Republican Party is at 25% strength. And this was South Scottsdale and most of Tempe. I lived in Tempe, and Scott South Scottsdale was part of our legislative district. It was the old legislative district 17. And that just blew me away. So then McCain loses to Barry Soetoro, and we go to our February meeting after the January county committee meeting and the state meeting. Then our first legislative district meeting was in February. And so the meeting comes to a close, or it is coming to a close. And they said, and so the chairman says, well, we'll see you all in 2 months. So I raised my hand. I go, what do you mean in 2 months? Well, in off election years, we meet every other month. I go, we just elected a Marxist, an avowed Marxist to the presidency. We should be meeting every 2 weeks. I make a motion that we continue to meet monthly. Seconded, took a vote. So we're going to meet monthly. So that's how I got into becoming a precinct committeeman. And then I realized in 2009, in February of 2009, I gotta start recruiting people, because we're going to go down the tubes with this guy, Soetoro. I don't call him Barack Hussein Obama. His real name is Barry Soetoro. And so I started recruiting. And then eventually I created a website. I wrote article after article after article at redstate.com. I was the precinct strategy guy. I went by a pseudonym, Cold Warrior, because I was working for the state of California as an outside attorney. And I was afraid that if they found out how conservative I was, they'd fire me. So I did it all sort of sub rosa. And, but then eventually around 2013, I decided I don't care if they fire me. So I started writing at Breitbart.com under my real name, because I had met Steve Bannon at the second Red State gathering in Austin, Texas, when he was showcasing his movie about conservative women. And I went up to him, and he was wearing a West Point thing, a jacket, a short jacket, athletic jacket. And I said, hey, that's a cool jacket. Where'd you get it? He goes, oh, it's my daughter's. I go, oh, great. I go, yeah, I'm class of 78. She had just graduated, and she gave him her jacket. And so we hit it off, and I told him about the precinct committeeman strategy. And then he invited me to write articles a few years later. And I started writing article after article after article at Breitbart.com, same topic, precinct committeeman strategy. And then eventually, when War Room started, he had me come on as a guest, and let me talk about the precinct committeeman strategy. So I developed my website, precinctstrategy.com. I wrote my little book, short, to the point, inexpensive as possible. It's been delisted by Amazon inexplicably. I've been getting a runaround from them for 3 weeks now. Every time I ask, oh, wrong department. Oh, well, blah, blah, blah. You can buy it in Europe. You can buy it in Japan, but you can't in the United States anymore. Wonder why. But we'll see. I'll eventually get it fixed. But you can buy the Kindle version.
Yes.
And you can buy the Audible version still in the United States. But they're telling me, we don't know. Well, they won't tell me. They didn't send me anything saying why this got delisted. Then they told me the problem was solved. Now they're telling me, no, the problem's not solved. And it's just like ridiculous. So anyways,
it must be over target, Dan. It must
be. Maybe. I think it's just a snafu, but who knows these days?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. So tell people why. You've kind of said the problem and what you saw, and so you've been doing this. You've been, in this realm. Well, let me back up, because you said something that is quite profound and obviously very different than what's happening these days. In the 60s, you learned about precinct committee officers, or PCs, or PCOs, as we call them in Washington State, in 7th grade in social studies class.
Yep.
That is not happening anymore.
I know. I'll give you, after I moved here, I was working on this big case, and it ended. And then I ended up I didn't want to do litigation anymore. And I got a job at the Department of Education in the state of Arizona. And the superintendent of public instruction was somebody I had helped get elected. And she was in about her 3rd year. And a friend of mine who worked with her said, "Hey, we got our chief counsel position open. Maybe you'd like to apply." I go, "Okay." So I did, and they hired me. And what I found out was that and I had learned this before, that everywhere in the standards for social studies, when they were talking about political parties, when they got down to the nuts and bolts of what people could do, it said this: now guide the students in a discussion of what they think they could do to change things politically where they live. Well, that's like asking the blind to lead the blind. You're supposed to be telling them that. So my son comes home from school, and he's now in public high school. He's a freshman, and he comes home, and I knew what happened. And he told me, he says, "Hey, Dad, they got to that point you told me about today. We got to that point, and here's what happened. When the teacher asked the students, my classmates and me, what we could do, nobody raised their hand." Well, of course they wouldn't raise their hand. They don't know what to do. You're supposed to be telling them what to do. So he raised his hand, and my son said to the teacher, "Well, here's one thing that you could do. You could figure out which political party you're most affiliated with, philosophically, and then you could seek out your local committee and volunteer to be a precinct committeeman." And that's all he said. And then the teacher looked at him, and he said, "Alec, that's very good. What's a precinct committeeman?" That's a teacher teaching civics.
And it's a basis of our political structure. Both,
Right.
I mean, that's a nonpartisan conversation. It's
Exactly.
not that you're trying to steer anybody, but you're showing
Right.
how people get involved with
Right.
their local parties.
Yes. Yeah. So what I did is, luckily, coincidentally, the social studies standards were going to be revamped.
Mhm.
And so I got in touch with Hillsdale College from the direction of my boss, the superintendent of public instruction, and we put together we took their model civics instruction, and we inserted there was a committee of bureaucrats at the Department of Education who were rewriting everything, and we got that from them. Then I rewrote what they wrote, and I said, we've got to put in it that the students have to learn about the election code and that govern the political parties. We got that in there. Then they have to know what a precinct committeeman is and what statutes govern the election of precinct committeemen. We got that in the standards. And we got about 3 or 4 other things into the standards. And we got it through the State Board of Education. Now, the way it works in Arizona is the governor appoints everybody to the board. The only person who's not appointed by the governor is the elected superintendent of public instruction. She was only one of 15, but we got it through and we got it approved. Now, I don't know if they've changed it back and watered it down again. They might have. I haven't checked recently. My kids are out of school now. They're not, but we were able to achieve that. And see, that's what, if the schools aren't teaching it, parents have to teach the kids. And the reason Alec knew what was coming is because I was teaching my kids about this stuff. And I don't know if I had written my book at that point. I don't think so. But when I walked to get my signatures, I took them along as a civics lesson. And then everything I wrote, the articles I would write, I would tell them about it. If I was on a podcast, I'd tell them about it. And I took them. My daughter came one time to a legislative district committee meeting and played piano, during the interim before. And that was really cool. And we got to teach the kids.
Yeah.
Got to teach the kids.
Yeah. Interesting, Dan. We have something else in common. I was on the State Board of Education for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
One of the elected in our state. In our state, it's a mix. It's a majority of governor appointed.
Okay.
We have a 16-member board. And then we do have the elected superintendent as well. They're trying to change that, which I am not in favor of. And then we do have 5 positions that are elected by school board members.
Oh.
So very interesting that we have that in common. But again, how important it is that we have conservatives like yourself on those boards or in, those roles. You were a supporting role for the superintendent, and to guide like these standards. I mean, that is what determines what is taught in our schools and what isn't. And now we are at a place where I know in Washington State, they don't learn about this. Nobody knew about this really. For very few people. So I think we need to go back to that. We need to bring that blue book concept that you had, that Wisconsin had. Back.
Yeah. Let me tell you something about that. Now the blue book in Wisconsin doesn't have a chapter on political parties anymore. And guess who's in control of the state legislature? Republicans. The Republicans don't want anybody to know about how this works in Wisconsin.
See, and this is part of the why, because you really nail this in your book. Again, I really highly recommend people go and find this book on Amazon. Tell them the name again, Dan.
Well, it's a real catchy title. How to Get Into the Real Ball Game of Politics, Where You Live to Help President Donald J. Trump Make America Great Again.
Yeah. And we'll show it a couple times. It's in the resources that I listed under the posting for the video. So you can find out on Amazon. Great. And it is under Dan Schultz name. You don't use a pseudonym. So
it's me.
Under your name.
This is what it looks like. And it's big print. You can read this in 30 minutes. Yep. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are in the back for ready reference, because I reference both of them. I quote both of them in the book. And I recommend you get the paperback once it comes back online, because you can take this with you to the meetings, and there's plenty of room for notes and stuff, and there's a few white pages in the back as well, and then you'll always have it with you. And then I know that many of the precinct committeemen who become the people who become precinct committeemen, they don't go the next step, and they don't learn like everything, like the basics. I remember walking into our caucus meeting in the presidential election year when Romney was running for the presidency, and these 3 people, my neighbors right here, they're no longer PCs because they're all in their 80s now, but they were retirees, and we're walking into the caucus meeting to elect a state convention delegates. Only the precinct committeemen and those who had been appointed before the end of the prior year are eligible to vote. Any Republican can come. And the libertarians were trying to infiltrate the Republican Party. So there were a lot of libertarians there that day. And a bunch of them got elected as alternates, but none of them got elected as actual delegates. They were alternate delegates. And they messed up our whole presidential nominated convention that year because they infiltrated, and we didn't have, only half of our precinct committee slots were filled at that time. And so anyways, we're walking into the caucus, and one of them turned to me and said, Dan, he goes, what exactly are we doing here today? Because I hadn't sufficiently taught them in discussions about what they really didn't understand it. And we do have a precinct committeeman handbook that explains it. But what I did is I created I created a graphic that shows, okay, precinct committeemen are elected. Well, voters elect precinct committeemen, and the precinct committeemen elect the electors of the state chairman who serves on the RNC, and every 4 years they elect the state convention delegates, and the state convention delegates elect the national committeeman and the national committee woman. The only way to change the RNC is by flooding the party with conservatives.
Yep.
That's the only way. You cannot buy a seat on the RNC. You have to get elected. And the electors are the precinct committeemen. They elect the electors of the chair, the state national committeeman, the state national committee woman. So we, the people, it all comes back to we, the people. I quote the preamble, I think 3 different times in my book. Those are the 3 words big print, big script on the parchment. We the people, blinking light. We the people. We've got to get organized and united politically where we live in the best way, the best place, the best time possible. And it's real simple. It's at our respective local Republican Party committee meetings.
Yeah.
And the RNC hopes we never figure this out. Because if you go to GOP.com, there's nothing about becoming a precinct committeeman. Nothing.
Isn't that crazy? And that's the basis. It is the grassroots effort. I wanted to read this real quick and share this because I think the overview of your book is just nails it. This book is for conservatives who are tired of being lied to by fake Republicans who run as, quote, campaign conservatives, in the words of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and who want to do something to change these fake Republicans by taking them out of their current office in the upcoming 2018 primary elections and beyond, or the upcoming elections. The only conservatives that matter are those we conservatives succeed in electing to office. And this book will teach you how to get into the fray to make that happen. It happens, simply put, when the best conservatives in the all-important, traditionally very low turnout primary elections, I love that you focus on that, gets more votes than the other Republican primary election candidates. I mean, hard-hitting truth. I love it. I mean, there's a reason why we have gotten what we have gotten. It's because our political parties have not been effective and they haven't been led by true conservatives. Correct? In your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So that's
where are all the conservatives? I don't know where they are. And where are all the conservative influencers? Are any of them PCs? I know of really only a couple. One who's pretty well known is John Fredericks on Real America's Voice. He's been a precinct committeeman. He's been a convention delegate. He's been a national convention delegate. He's moved over the last 5 years 2 or 3 times because of his work, from like Virginia to South Carolina, maybe to North Carolina, maybe back to Virginia. And he has gotten involved and he talks about it. But almost every other conservative influencer, what the hell do these people? I don't have any conservative influencers I listen to. They don't teach me anything. We've got to do this ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need to, I tell everybody that if you do have people that you listen to every day, like, okay, Clay and Buck, even Rush Limbaugh, they by contract, they're not allowed to talk about this stuff. So I don't listen to them anymore. Because the advertisers don't want, see, if we fix the political problems in this country, most of the conservative influencers won't have anything to do, because all they do is talk about, oh, look at how bad this is. Look at how bad that is. But this part never comes. Now, here's what we need to do together about it to fix it.
Yeah.
We need to get involved where we live locally in our respective local Republican Party committees. It's a volunteer position. It's free by and large. Some states you have to pay some nominal dues, but it's a pittance. That part never comes, either because they don't know to say it, or number two, they do know to say it, but they won't say it because their advertisers would go bonkers. Don't tell them how to fix everything. How am I going to sell my gold?
Yep. People in power want to stay in power.
Yeah.
And what is the saying? All power corrupts, and all power, or all
absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And so there's a reason why. And Dan, when you and I first talked on the phone, I had shared my experience here in our state. Most people know me pretty well by now. I'm a former chairwoman of the Spokane County GOP party. And before that, I ran for office for state representative. And then before, during that time, I was still on the State Board of Education and was former school board member. So I dabbled a little bit, but I really didn't get politically involved until after COVID, and ran for office and all that. And I saw it with my own eyes. I saw what President Trump was going through since, before 2016 and all of that. And I saw the dysfunction, like what is going on with these Republicans? But I didn't really know until Donald Trump became president, and I saw this clash of within the Republican Party. And I thought, what the heck is going on? And then when I experienced it personally here in our state, locally and statewide, because I was running for office, it really gave me a front row seat as to the dysfunction and the internal conflict between, conservatives and people that say they're Republican, I guess, if you want to say that.
Right.
And trust me, like, we got to be careful of labels because it can divide us, and it really is a numbers game. But we want to make sure that we have lots of evidence before we start saying somebody's a fake Republican, because it doesn't help. Just because they don't agree on one issue doesn't make them a fake Republican. But we really do have this problem in our party system, that we have tons of these slots that aren't even being utilized. And that's part of it. So talk to us a little bit more. I wanted to share real quick this quote by Donald Trump, because I think this is such an endorsement, and you have this on your website as well. So this was just a couple years ago, and Donald Trump quoted this, correct, Dan?
Yeah. The people who helped make that happen were Steve Bannon, Liz Harrington, Mike Lindell, Steve Stern, the flag shirt guy, and then a few people on Trump's staff. And we were able to get to him. And I had sent him my book in 2019. And then in early 2022, Steve Stern, I mailed some hard copies to Steve Stern, and he was going to go to Mar-a-Lago. And he went to Mar-a-Lago, and he gave 2 more copies, maybe 3, to Donald Trump. And then that got the ball rolling. And I sent him some verbiage, and he sent out a press release saying what it says there. And the Precinct strategy explained by Dan Schultz is a great way to restore our republic by transforming our party from currently at less than half strength at the precinct level into a full strength, get out the vote powerhouse. And there was more to it, and he sent it out a press release. And my site, I think, got 6,000 hits that day.
I bet.
And then 6,000 the second day, and then it kind of petered off after that. But there were people telling me he's not interested. Steve Bannon told me he's not interested in the precinct committee administration. He doesn't care about the party. Well, there were others that I knew who were in the Oval Office with Trump. One guy, James Brady, a real young guy, I asked him on a conference call with some West Pointers. He was a guest speaker. I got to ask him, do you think President Trump knows that our party is at less than half strength? Has he ever talked about it? Have you seen anybody ever talk to him about the fact that our party's at less than half strength? He says, no, I don't think he knows. And so I told Lindell that, I told Bannon that, I told Steve Stern that, and finally now he knows. But the problem is he's not recruiting either. And I don't blame him, because here's why the incumbent conservatives don't recruit. It's not in their best interest, because they want everything to stay the same. They got elected. And if everything stays the same, they'll get reelected, including in the primary, the most important election. If some conservative, I'll give you 2 examples. Andy Biggs, I know him. He doesn't really remember me. David Schweikert, I know, and he remembers me. They've been precinct committeemen, they're state committeemen, but they don't recruit precinct committeemen. And the reason they don't is they're afraid that if they recruit precinct committee, and they're members of the U.S. House, if they recruit precinct committeemen in their House district, what happens if somebody like Dan Schultz comes along and says to all those new people that they recruited, hey, Andy Biggs isn't getting it done. David Schweikert's been there 3 or 4 terms now. He's part of the establishment. He's not doing anything. Vote for me. I've never been there. I'm not beholden to anybody. See, they're afraid of that. That's why they don't recruit. I don't blame them. I blame us,
Yeah.
We, the people, have to get this done.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got one of our listeners, Vivian, said, so true about the advertisers. Our local radio pundits don't ever want to talk about stolen elections, for instance, right? Again,
Yep.
because of who is paying their bills, and they're often
Right.
not
They're
allowed
afraid
to.
they'll get sued.
Right, right. So
Yep.
let's talk about this half strength thing, okay? Because this
Yeah.
is really, really key to understanding this. So describe what is half strength. Describe the numbers and the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I can give you hard numbers for some places. And the overall number, the total number of precinct committeemen is about 400,000 slots for the Republican Party, all across the 50 states, the 5 territories in DC. And I got those numbers many, many years ago when Ken Blackwell was running for RNC chair, and he did a survey. He was the Secretary of State of Ohio at the time. He did a survey, and he ran to be RNC chair, telling them, the party's at half strength. I want to get it to 100% strength. Well, that's why he didn't get elected. They didn't. That was the last thing that they wanted, the RNC members. And there's only about 200,000 out of the 400,000 that are filled. I've got a pie chart on my website that shows it. About half are conservatives, about half are rhinos. And as a result, they're butting their heads together, constantly fighting one faction against the rest. Well, if we change that dynamic by filling up the 200,000 vacancies with conservatives, now as that chart shows there that you're displaying, it goes from a 50-50 split and a half-strength party to a 3-to-1 majority of conservatives over the rhinos. All the rhinos will quit. We'll have a full-strength party, solidly conservative. And then when it comes time for the primary elections, we can toss out all of the fake Republican incumbents that do nothing but go along to get along with the uniparty. And that's what we need to do. And if we don't do it, we're going to lose the republic. I am convinced of that based on what I know about history. Look, I studied communism for my job when I was an intelligence officer in the Army. I read about communism while I was in middle school and high school. And then I was an intelligence officer, and my job was to defeat the communists. I know what they're doing. They're infiltrating our country. The Chinese are doing it. The Russians are doing it. The East Germans are doing it. Well, not the East Germans anymore. Maybe they are, but they're not hardcore communists anymore. Germany, they reunited and everything. But Angela Merkel, she was a communist. She's from from East Berlin. And so what we've got to do, we the people have to take this first step. We have to get in control of a political party. We're not. The Republican Party is not a conservative party. It's a rhino party. It's, like I said, it's a 50-50 split, but it doesn't have to be that way. We the people can fix it. I'm confident that we can. I'm not confident that we're going to, because I've been at this since 2009, and that pie chart hasn't changed.
So is that was going to be one of my questions. What have you seen change? Have you seen or do you know if the numbers have grown of people filling these vacant spots?
In some places, but by and large, not. I'll give you an example. A guy called me last spring, it was around April, from Texas something. I can't never remember the name of the Texas Observer, Texas something, Texas Sentinel, Texas something. It's a conservative online paper. He calls me up, this young guy. He just graduated from journalism school. And, hey, where are you getting these numbers, Dan? And I said, I get it from all of the people in Texas that I know who are in precinct chair. They're called precinct chairs down there. And I always ask, how many slots do you have and how many are filled? And I've yet to hear anybody tell me that it's more than 50% filled. So I said, but here's what you can do. I'm not going to do it for you, but you can go to the Secretary of State's website, and they've got a list of every precinct. And the way it works in Texas is there's 1 man and 1 woman slot for every precinct. And then if it's a really big precinct, there might be 4 slots. They've got a chart that shows every precinct committee. It's supposed to be reported by every county elections department. Then you could send a public records request to every elections department in all of the counties in Texas and say, send me a list of all the Republican slots and all those ones that have gotten filled in the 2024 primary election. And he did that. And it turned out and he wrote an article about it. 44% only were filled.
Wow.
In Maricopa County, they publish online the list of all the precinct positions by party. That's done by a mathematical formula. And then the number of candidates that are running for those slots who got on the ballot, either as a write-in, you fill out one piece of paper to be a write-in candidate, or you got on the ballot, your name will be on the ballot. There's 7,542 slots. I counted them all up, and literally it was only 50% had a candidate.
In Maricopa,
so in Maricopa County,
which is wrought with election integrity issues. Hello.
Exactly. Where are all the conservatives? I don't know where they are, but I know where they ain't, and they ain't in our party.
Yeah,
so
and how's that working?
If you're listening to this and you're a conservative, are you in the party? And if you're not, why aren't you?
Yep, and I don't know the why, right? I think people got lazy.
Either.
I think people thought, didn't think we needed to stay involved until things got so bad that so many of us woke up in 2020 when it was a huge affront to our constitutional freedoms and said, what the heck, how is this happening? And so now I think we do have a lot more people. I watched or I saw a tweet or an X post from Mike Benz yesterday that said, isn't it crazy how many of us are following government accounts now? Like the White House or congressional candidates or, so many more people are paying attention. But this really is, if you want to be effective, this is how you get to be effective. This is how your dollars and your time spent is going to be most effective. Correct? I mean, you have some great quotes in your book about local action.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first step. It's the first best step. So pick your issue, whatever your issue is. Let's say school boards. You don't like the transgenderism nonsense. It's in public schools. Well, the best way to change what's happening with the school board is to change out the existing school board members, because they don't really care what the parents say. They got elected. You go to that meeting and you take 15 people with you and you point at them and you say, these are my cohorts and we're growing. And if you don't change your tune, come next election, you're out, because we're organizing and uniting locally for real political action. And we're going to get new school board members. No matter who runs against you, they got to be better than you. And we're going to take you out. Right. See, but none of that's happening anywhere. It's just the parents go and they all yell and scream and they don't get organized and united politically. Same thing with city council members, county board members, state legislators. Look, I talked about this on a podcast recently and on a Twitter space. It's been 8 years. It's been 8 years since the stolen 2020 election. And I couldn't remember the guy's name, but it was Matt Salmon was running for governor, and Carrie Lake was running for governor way back after the 2020 election in 2022. And so I went to my legislative district meeting, and Matt Salmon and some of the other candidates were going to be there. Carrie Lake didn't show up. She sent a representative. I was only allowed to ask one question. We only had so much time. There was about 6 or 7 people running for governor. Matt Salmon was one of them, former representative, U.S. House, now running for governor. So I raised my hand. I got called on. I was at the microphone. I said, will you stand here right now in front of all of these precinct committeemen and other Republicans that are here to listen to you? Will you stand here and say that you believe that the 2020 presidential election here in Arizona was fraudulent? Oh, he started tap dancing around and hemmed and hawed. And well, yeah, there were problems. I said, that's not what I asked you. Will you say that it was fraudulent? He wouldn't. Within 3 days, he dropped out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you raised so many good points, Dan. The numbers matter. I think so many people try to attack things as one-offs, and they have good intention, but it's not strategic. If you go
Yeah.
to a school board member or you go to a city council, you are one person. And listen, they will dismiss you, unfortunately, because it just isn't that much of a threat. But when
Yeah.
you organize, we've seen some organizations of some groups, like around school boards or around COVID, that kind of came up and were there for a little bit and then kind of went away.
Yeah, they'd be more effective if they would wear two hats. Form your group and then get everybody in your group to become a precinct committeeman. And to finish my thought there on why the state legislatures, there's 22 states that have a trifecta, where there's a Republican, quote unquote, Republican governor and quote unquote, Republican majority in the state legislature, 22. And then Arizona has Republican state legislature majorities, and so does Wisconsin. And so, per the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the Constitution, the Times, Places, and Manner Clause, with respect to the federal elections, in Arizona and in Wisconsin, without the governor's approval, they can just mandate to the Secretary of State, it's got to be a one-day election, no machines, no vote by mail other than military and invalids confirmed, got to do a hand count, everybody's got to show ID, one-day election. They can do that. Why don't they do it? They're not afraid of us. There's not enough of us demanding that. And then here in Arizona, I'm sorry, in the trifecta states, Texas, Florida,
Yeah.
2 examples. DeSantis and Greg Abbott and the Republican state legislation, why haven't they gotten rid of the machines? Oh, simple. They're not afraid of losing their next primary election in the state legislature. And like I said, 44% of the precinct committeeman slots only are filled in the Republican Party in Texas. In Florida, I don't know of a county that has 50% or more. What I get anecdotally is it's about 35% average. That's why the state legislators aren't afraid of losing their next primary election. And they'll never be afraid unless we, the people, invade, we, the conservative people, invade and take over the party. And how onerous it is. You have to go to one meeting a month for 3 hours. People won't even do that. And if they don't, we're going to lose the republic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a case in point right now, we see Congress not really doing their job. They should be, passing these bills to enforce, reinforce President Trump's executive orders, right?
Yeah.
And
they're not afraid.
doing it.
Yeah. I talked about this a couple of days ago. Is that my son? No, it's somebody else. He texted me. He's going to be here in about 15 minutes, so then I'll have to leave. But anyways, I talked about it. I'd use 2 examples. Mitch McConnell, when he ran in 2020 to get reelected to the U.S. Senate, there was a primary. He got 82% of the vote in the primary, but the turnout was only about 30%. So he only got 24% of all the possible votes that could have been cast. But 70% of Republicans didn't bother to vote in the primary.
Right.
They apparently thought Mitch McConnell was great. And he had like 5 or 6 challengers. None of them knew how to boost turnout. James Langford, 2 years later over in Oklahoma, who carries water for Mitch McConnell all the time. He ran for re-election. He had a guy named Jackson Lahmeyer, who was a conservative, run against him. 30% turnout. Langford got about 67% of the 30% turnout. Right. But if Lahmeyer had done a better job of boosting turnout of the lower information, lower propensity voters, Republican, I know how to do it. I did it for a candidate in 2016 in Arizona. We took out an incumbent rhino in the primary. The guy didn't even see us coming, using the precinct committeeman strategy. See, these candidates, they fall prey to consultants who say, just raise a whole bunch of money and then we'll have a advertising campaign. Well, who listens to any of that stuff? The only people who listen to that stuff are the 30% or so that will vote. The 70%, they don't like politics. They don't listen to that. You have to go to them personally with a warm conservative body. And who does that? Precinct committeemen.
Yep, because they're of your
3
neighborhood.
hours. Yes,
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
That's
It works.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that, again, I love about your book is you go into this strategy, and I can tell you being part of, elections and running for office, and even being part of the party for the last couple of years, this was not your strategy was not discussed. And which is kind of sad because we built our program, we built our leadership on your premise with the precinct strategy. So we were successful in Spokane County in getting a new conservative board back in the end of 2022, right? And we shifted and we started to build infrastructure because we were serious. There was lots of problems, dysfunctions. Maybe, I'm not trying to say that people were bad, but it was dysfunctional, it wasn't effective. And so we started intentionally building these systems and these structures, but we didn't necessarily target the people that you're talking about. So you talk about vinos or vinos in your book.
Yeah.
Talk about that strategy, because I think that's really critical.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. In 2020. So Trump's running for re-election. Trump victory, the joint RNC Trump campaign cabal who were sabotaging Trump, they were telling the precinct committeemen, here's what you need to do. You need to target those high propensity voters. I went, what are you, nuts? Are you deliberately sabotaging Trump? Is that what you're doing? I'm not going to do that. And so my precinct, we had 10 precinct committeeman positions. All 10 were filled with conservatives. We carved up our precinct into 10 sectors. And what we did, and then using GOP data center, we got the list of the voters who vote 50% or less of the time. The 100% voters, they're going to vote. The 75% voters, they're going to vote in the general. The only reason they're a 75%er is they probably missed a primary. We targeted the 50% and less, the people who voted twice in the last 4 general or a primary, 4 elections, general or primary. The 50%ers, the 25%ers, 1 out of 4. The 0%ers, 8% of Republicans hadn't voted in the last 4 elections in our precinct. And then the 0/5s, this is the nomenclature that the GOP data center uses. Those are the people who moved into the precinct or didn't have a voting history, or they were brand new. They just turned 18 and now we're going to vote for the first time. And what we did is we called them if we had a phone number, and then we made sure a voter guide got dropped off at their houses. And been doing this in the past. We got over 93% of Republicans. Over 90%. There were 4 precincts out of 42 that got 90% or more. There were 2 that got 93%. We got just over 90%. The average was 72%.
Wow.
So if we had been able to get like 30 or 40% of the precincts in Arizona, that's about 1,450 precincts, to get 90% plus for Donald Trump, and we didn't realize that they were using the vote by mail system and the Dominion's machines. We didn't know that stuff yet. We weren't clued in on that. But if we had additionally voted all on election day or close to election day, there is no way they could have jiggered the election results with the machines. They just couldn't have done it. But the average turnout was only 72% because Trump victory was sabotaging Trump, and he lost Arizona.
Wow.
Quote unquote, lost Arizona. See, so what you've got to do is you've got to do it down at the precinct level, develop a get out the vote plan that targets in the general election the lower and in the primary, if you're trying to take out an incumbent rhino, the lower information, lower propensity voters. And if you do that every election cycle for years, guess what? The numbers start to change. There's fewer and fewer lower information, lower propensity voters, because they're getting used to getting the voter guide. They're getting used to having a flyer dropped off at their door showing how bad the incumbent is and how good the primary challenger is.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been doing year after year, every 2 years. And also in mayoral and city council elections in Tempe.
That's
and
really important.
I've got a video on my how-to videos page that explains what I just explained to you in 15 minutes with, screenshots and everything. It's really easy to do, but it takes a little bit of grunt work. But I never ask more than 3 hours. And it's usually 1 hour worth of phone calls. I put on a football game, turn off the sound, and make my phone calls. Because they're saying the same thing. Hey, it's Dan Schultz. I'm a precinct committeeman in your precinct. And there's a primary election coming up. We have a really good candidate. The incumbent's not so good. I'm going to drop a flyer at your house. Look for it, please. Please vote. Your vote in the primary is more important than in the general election. Please vote.
Yeah.
And then I go on. And that took me 30 seconds. Then I go on to the next call and the next call. And so in about an hour, I'm done with my 35, 45 phone calls. And then you go door to door and drop off those promised flyers. And even if you didn't have a phone number, if you know that there are lower information, lower propensity people, they're going to get a personalized flyer with my name on it, my phone number, my email address in case they have any questions. That's how you boost turnout. It works.
Yeah, it's personal.
That doesn't make money for consultants.
Yes, and that's exactly it. So there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about real quick, because your structure in Arizona is a little different than ours. We have a precinct committee officer, one for every about 1,000. Well, it's a precinct, so one for each precinct, and so it's about 1,000 households. So my thing is, I've always said, because I am a PCO still, and I said it's precinct committee officer, so build a committee, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
And I have 5 or 6 people that help me in my precinct, because we have around 800 Republicans in my precinct. It's fairly conservative. So that's a little difference, but you can still play this out. So you have a team of 10, ideally 5 to 10 that are helping you. So you don't have to spend so much time. But the other thing I really wanted to nail on Dan, before you have to go, is why are the primaries so important in this work?
Well, Raheem Kassam summed it up. I think it was that same day that when you showed that video clip. So I was on earlier, and then they had other guests on. And then at the end of that day, Bannon turned to Raheem and said something like, hey, Raheem, you got any final thoughts before we go? Because it was like some Irish festival commemoration thing that they were going to play. Maybe it was around St. Patrick's Day. Something. And anyway, so they were going to leave with that. And so before that, Raheem said, I'm going to go back to what Dan said about the primaries and the precinct committee strategy. And he goes, I think Dan's right. He goes, if we don't build a party that is capable of electing new people in the primary and taking out some of these uniparty Republicans, then this uniparty that we have right now, where it's fake Republican rhinos hand in glove with the Democrats taking us down the road to socialism, if we don't change the complexion of the House and the Senate, we're going to end up like England. We're going to be under socialism before we know it. So I think Dan is right. And see, that's it. The Constitution gives us the power every 2 years to replace every member of the House. But you got to do it in the primary.
Yeah.
And then every 2 years as well, 1/3 of the senators can be removed in the primary. But I asked Grok about 3 weeks ago, hey, Grok, go back 50 years and tell me what percentage of incumbents in the United States Senate and the United States House win their primary? Over the last 50 years, what percentage won their primary? It was over 96%.
It's a machine. The money
That's
machine.
it in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And whose fault is that? It's we the people's fault. We can fix it, but we got to get organized. This is my mantra. We got to get organized and united politically. Where we live, real ball game of politics, where you live, at the best place, best time, and in the best way possible. And where is that? That's at our respective local Republican Party committee meetings.
Yeah.
And so I just have step-by-step directions on how to find it. If you don't know where yours is meeting, find it, and then go to the meeting, take friends with you, and just sit there and take it all in. Go on a reconnaissance mission. Just seek it out. See, and then ask yourself after you're there, do I really want these yin-yangs making decisions for me in the Republican Party? Or should I be there?
Yeah.
And the conclusion is probably going to be, I better be there.
Yeah, because good people, right? We need more
Right.
good people. Unfortunately, power corrupts,
Yes.
people. And so you have a lot of people that have been there a long time. Again, they might not be bad people, but they're used to doing things the same old way. In fact, we have some great conservatives that have really challenged this new system that we have and coming out with an endorsement pre-primary, right? Like the strategy that you are talking about. And yet, because they've always done it differently, where the county party didn't do that, they are criticizing what we're doing. They're saying, "Oh, it's causing division." Well, I know, because we're upsetting the apple cart. But
Right.
how did that work before? We were
Right.
changing things, right? So it really is critical. Dan, any final thoughts? I want to respect your time, and I know you've got your son coming back. So any
Yeah.
thoughts that you want to share with people?
Well, I always ask, do you have a better strategy? You who are listening to me, tell me what it is. Seriously, go to precinctstrategy.com. That's the only thing you have to memorize. My email address is dan@precinctstrategy.com. Send me your better idea, because if there's a better idea, I'd like to know what it is, because I haven't found one yet. It starts with the preamble of the Constitution, which is, in the back of the book here. We the people. We the people are going to get organized and united politically, et cetera, or we're not. And right now we're not getting it done. The other thing I like to say is this. You might be asking yourself, well, if I do this, Schultz, can you guarantee me that if we fill up those 200,000 vacancies that we're going to save the Republic? Of course I can't guarantee that, because I don't know what else is going to happen. I don't have a perfect crystal ball. Nobody does. But the flip side of that coin's easy. If the status quo remains the same, we're going down the tubes as a nation. History tells us that. When we get to the apathy stage, where nobody wants, this happens to every republic that dies. They get to the abundance stage. Look at our standard of living. Everybody's worried about the Final Four and the upcoming, NFL. They're already starting to there's stuff on ESPN already about the practices of the NFL. Everybody's got something that they're really into, and they don't have time to do anything because, well, maybe somebody else will do it. That politics stuff. Like I have a brother. Okay, he told me a few weeks ago, I'm just not really interested in politics. And I said, well, politics is interested in you. Have you ever looked at your tax bills? You like your property taxes? You like the crappy services you're getting where you live from the government? They're interested in getting into your back pocket. You don't care about that. And see, he doesn't. Why? Well, he lives in a nice house. Him and his wife are near retirement. They have grandchildren now. And what do they have to worry about? Yeah. Well, look at what's happening in England. Look what's happening in Italy. Look what is happening in France, Sweden. They're being invaded and taken over by an invading horde of fake asylum seekers who are changing their country dramatically. And it's almost to the point of no return. That's going to happen here if we don't get off our duffs.
Yeah.
So no, I can't guarantee you that we're going to save the republic, but I can guarantee you this: if the status quo remains the same and you don't get involved, whoever you happen to be, and you think somebody else is going to do it for you, we're going to lose the republic, guaranteed.
And one final question I just want to make sure to ask you is Donald Trump is president now. He's doing amazing things, but the same thing applies. Like, we can't just sit on our duffs and expect him to just wave his wand and fix everything, correct? I mean, we've got to do our part at the grassroots level.
Right. And historically, the incoming president, when there's been a change from a Democrat to a Republican, when it comes time for the House and Senate, it gets flipped. One or the other or both get flipped. So right now we have a narrow Republican margin. What if they get flipped to Democrat? Then everything stops.
Yep.
He'll not get anything through. And that's what happened his first term. One chamber, I think, flipped. And so how do we prevent that? We get organized and united politically where we live in the best place, best time, best way possible. That's at our respective local Republican Party committee meetings. We fill up all these vacancies. Now we have an army that's working together to boost turnout for better people. That's the second graphic at my website. We have to unite where and how it matters to boost turnout for the best conservatives in the all-important, usually very low turnout primary. So those conservatives win and go on to the general election. So it's not an echo, it's a real choice, a stark conservative against a stark Democrat. And then let the chips fall as they may.
Yep. And without people getting involved, it's going to stay the same dysfunctional, honestly, Republican Party that it's been. A lot of people, I hear people go, well, why isn't the Republican Party doing this? And why isn't it doing that? Well, I can tell you, because it's very dysfunctional and it's not an effective organization, because there's people in there, but there's not enough good people in there. And so a small amount of, people have been able to kind of keep it small, keep it all. Right. And run roughshod. So
for every conservative who complains about the Republic, I'm not joining the Republican Party because it's not, as a precinct committee, I'm not going to do that because it's not conservative enough. Well, the reason it's not conservative enough, dunderhead, is because people like you who complain, you conservatives who complain, aren't in it. If there's 200,000 and there's 20 million conservatives who live in the United States, but we can't, and there were 74 million who voted for Trump. And we can't even get 0.3% of that 74 million to get off their rear ends and do something other than boat parades and all that other crap that doesn't do anything. You want to do a boat parade? Use it to recruit precinct committeemen. You want to do a car caravan?
Yeah.
Use it to recruit precinct committeemen. So that's my final thought. My son just drove up, so I got to go.
Awesome.
Thanks
Dan,
for having
thank
me.
you so much, and blessings, and precinctstrategy.com. Go to his website and get the book. Again, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.